I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, April 22nd, 2016, the WNW 235. I was off last week. I did not put out a weekly news wrap-up. A lot of you people expressed your concern. I was fine. I had a really good interview with Rob Kirby, and I just thought nothing I could say would be better than that. I think I was right about that, and I just let it breathe all weekend. Didn't post anything. It got, 120 or 30 or 40,000 views. Rob Kirby, brilliant guy. I hope he'll come back soon. But that's the reason why I didn't have a weekly news wrap up this week. But I have one this week. And I'm starting with the president's trip to Saudi Arabia. Talk about a basket of gnarled up problems that I don't see how anybody can ever straighten out. The White House claims that they went to Saudi Arabia on a trip they said was to clear the air, quote, end quote, clear the air, end quote. I don't see how the air can get cleared. The U.S. and the Saudi Arabia kingdom, the kingdom as they call it, the big, rough splits between Saudi and America. This is supposed to be one of our top allies. I might have told you back in 2012 we sold them $60 billion in armament. One of the biggest single sales of helicopters and tanks and machine guns and you name it back in 2012. And man, they are upset, the Saudis. It's like I've been talking about how it looks like the president has changed sides. He's on the side of Iran now with this big, no deal nuke deal, which is nothing was signed, so there is no deal. As I predicted, there would be no deal. Nothing signed means no deal. And they get $150 billion. Now, this upsets the Saudis. And any of the Sunnis, all the Arabs, basically, the Ataris, the Kuwaitis, the United Arab Emirates, anybody who's a Sunni Muslim, as opposed to the Shia Muslim, that is Iran. And Iran says they have the right to defend themselves. They point to the 8-year war between Iraq, and they didn't have any way to defend themselves. Oh, okay, if they could just stop saying death to America and they want to wipe Israel out, that they'd have a better case. But anyway, I digress. So the president goes to Saudi Arabia, and look what we're doing. Talking about changing side. U.S. turned screws on Islamic State. Now that's what they would have been calling for, but that's not what's been happening. What's been happening is Turkey's been selling oil that the Islamic State, the ISIS, has been selling them to fund themselves. I've been talking about why don't they destroy the oil infrastructure, the trucks, the pumps. They wouldn't do that. They're not serious, right? They weren't serious. Now they're getting serious, and the U.S. is sending helicopters and some more troops and more boots on the ground. When the president said there'd be no boots, but this is ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I mean, forget about this Free Syrian Army. That was a pipe dream that may have been real in 08 or 09. I don't know. But listen, the Syrians fighting Assad are Sunni, and they are ISIS, and they are Al-Qaeda. And the U.S. has taken part with other Arab nations, Sunni Arab nations, to fund them to fight. And now they are trying to wipe them out. These are the people that the Saudis had slipped out this past week that they supplied the seed money for ISIS. Supplied the seed money. They've been supplying it. They've been funding them. They've been giving them armament. They are scared. They hate the Iranians and the Shias. The Shia hate the Sunnis and the Arabs. They hate each other. And I don't know how that's going to get straightened out. These are the people Saudi Arabia has been funding because they want to thwart Iran's influence in the Middle East. Now, meanwhile, the president says, well, listen, all you Sunni Muslims, you're going to have to just deal with, share the region with Iran. What universe does he live in? I mean, for these two parties is what I'm talking about. It's here's another sticking point. They had this legislation, it's bipartisan legislation. And it was John Cornyn and Chuck Schumer, Democrat, Chuck Schumer, Republican, Cornyn, Texas, Schumer, New York. They got this big legislation where they're going to release the 9/11, 28 pages that have been kept secret all these years for the 9/11 Commission. And they implicate, allegedly, supposedly, Saudi Arabia. I think they probably implicate the United States. They probably too many questions open up with all this. Building 7 falls straight to the ground without being hit by anything 8 hours after the attack. So the official 9/11 story unraveling. I'm sure the Saudis are going to drop some bombs of their own back on the U.S. with all this if they allow these 9/11 papers to be released. And also, the lawsuit says that families can sue people in Saudi Arabia. They can sue the Saudi Arabian government if they've had a hand in this. Of course, the White House says this will destroy sovereign immunity and it could leave Americans open for lawsuits. That's a legitimate point, but this is an election year. A Democrat and Republican senator have put up this legislation. It has strong bipartisan support. Can you imagine voting against this? Well, Obama says, his administration says that the president will veto it. Now, the Saudis have threatened to dump $1 trillion in U.S. assets, almost $1 trillion in U.S. assets. That includes Treasury bonds, folks. Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, is talking about how this could cause a global meltdown. Wow. I mean, have you ever heard this kind of talk between Saudi Arabia and the U.S.? A few years ago, they said the U.S. stabbed them in the back with what they were doing because they drew a red line in the sand, and the supposedly chemical weapons were used. And some people say it was it was ISIS trying to bait the U.S. into it. We almost had a standoff. We had a standoff out in the Mediterranean with the Russians. Ugly situation, totally ugly. So the Saudis are threatening that if this legislation becomes law, Obama says he's going to veto it. They're going to dump all these assets. Now, this, Obama may veto this, but again, this is not all Republicans. These are Democrats, and Hillary Clinton is saying that she's running in New York. Oh, yeah, I'm really for Chuck Schumer's legislation. Well, this is bipartisan support. Who is going to vote against this in an election year? I mean, the president, you're going to side with the Saudis? I mean, you may have a good point in terms of, this could open us up for sovereign immunity and our people and our citizens, soldiers, whoever could be sued. But still, the optics of this, the president's going to veto legislation for Americans to protect the Saudis? I don't know how that works out well for anybody. So I really don't know how you can, quote, clear the air, end quote, when none of this stuff is resolved. It looks like the U.S. is getting deeper and deeper into the Middle East, and we're inching closer and closer towards a much wider war in the Middle East. And this one, I believe, will have a nuclear component. Global economy continues to improve. This is one of the things I was talking to people. I just say, you keep with it. Remember, there's no recovery. There's no recovery. There's no recovery on Main Street. There's no recovery. Recovery on Wall Street, which is phony, and now we know it's just criminal fraud, propping up, every dirty trick, every criminal activity in the book to prop up, a phony stock market to make people think, give people the illusion we have some kind of economy. Well, boom, here it is. Intel plans to cut 12,000 jobs. Now, these are bottle washers and floor sweepers. This is 12,000 high-tech jobs in Silicon Valley. Granted, Intel has been bringing in, H-1B visa or, visa people, from the visa program to fill jobs since 2010. That's been since about 14,000 people. But still, boom, they cut 12,000 jobs. They want to save $750 million this year and up to 1.2 or 3 billion into mid 2017. What does that tell you about Intel's forward book of business? Well, what does that tell you about, for example, Dell's book of business? They're a privately held company. But what does that tell you about all the chips they make for all the products, tablets, laptops, cell phones? What does that tell you? It says if things aren't going well. Didn't that say that on a broad scale all over the tech industry? I mean, we're an information economy. Well, the information's not good. And then you have, I was surprised this is in USA Today. I was really surprised because these are the people that have been pushing this phony recovery thing. We're in a recovery. It's a fragile recovery. It's no recovery. Here Americans still don't see vibrant labor market. Now, this coupled with the news that the unemployment rate is, the job claims have crashed to I don't know, 40-year lows or whatever. Well, when you stop counting people, you can make the unemployment rate look really good. Except there's 95 million people that are no longer counted in the labor force, the labor participation rate. I mean, that's almost a third of America. Don't work. So, and if you look at some of the other headlines, I just pulled a few off to, these are just some headlines I pulled. Here we have, this is the defaults hit highest level since '09. This is just so far this year. A lot of these are oil and gas defaults. dozens of defaults. And then we have Sears. They're closing 78 stores this summer. Some of those are Kmart. That's not growth, folks. That is not growth. Look at the Baltic Dry Index. It hit all-time lows. Now it's up 40% from 300 to 500. But let me put that in perspective for you. This is a 12,000. This is what, 07, 08, 12,000, okay? And then, down here to, now it's back up to 500. It went from 300 to 500. Woo! Whoa, happy days are here again. But this is the global economy. Ships are backing up out of ports. Goods aren't moving. Services aren't happening. This is a global phenomenon. This means people can't make their bond payments. That's what this means. Here is I want to kind of give you a little closer up here. This is the China Containerized Freight Index. And look, this is right here this time last year. Okay, so, we were kind of chugging along. Okay, I mean, not bad. And then, here we have, and check out this number down 40%. This is the stuff coming out of China, folks. This is a global phenomenon. This is the engine that was running things. This is China. So I called up my friend Greg Mannarino. I was telling him that, hey, Bo Polney called me and said, his charts are saying that the stocks are going to sell off soon, like, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, sometime soon. Hard to hit the exact day, but he thinks it's topped out, Bo Polney. He also said that gold would never go back down. It's looking like he's right about that. I talked to Gregory Mannarino around that, and he says, I'll do a little chart work on that. Well, this is Mannarino. As I told you before, this is May. This is his call of the Dow. He says it topped out at 18.3. Yesterday it was down 100 and something points, 130, I don't know, whatever. This is November, October right here, okay? And then this is now, and this is what Mannarino points out. He goes, this is a triple top, folks. This is not good. This is what I think is going to happen, of some big chunking down days that are going to happen. And Mannarino told me, I said, well, are you going to go out on a limb and say that your 18.3 call on the Dow, the top, May of 2015, is that going to hold? And he goes, yes, I think it's going to hold. It's going to hold. Now, he said when he made that call, he said, well, I think they're going to try to run it back up. And, of course, there's not a real economy running it back up, as I've just showed you all the headlines and have been showing you how there is no real economy running this up. It's just smoke, mirrors, fraud, total, manipulation of markets, all markets, manipulated markets. So that's what he says. He says he thinks the high is going to hold. He did that May of 15. We're almost May of 16. And so I think it's a pretty good call. And the other news I want to bring up is this Chinese, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which they also do silver and platinum, some other metals. The Chinese have finally opened up the SGE, the Shanghai Gold Exchange. It was on Tuesday of this week. You had a couple of big days. On Thursday, between Wednesday and Thursday, overseas, gold goes up about 23, 24 bucks. Silver is up 60, 70 cents. In the next morning, it opens up here on this side of the ocean, and bam! Paper shorts come out. I mean, weeks and weeks of production for both gold and silver dumped on the market. A couple of $1 billion in non-existent paper metal contracts dumped on the market, and the price comes back down, and then there's a little bump back up. But this is not going to keep continuing, where China is going to have a real market. If you go to China, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, I'd like to sell a ton of gold, and I want to do it with paper contracts. They say, get out of here. If you want to sell a ton of gold, bring it out here, roll it out here on flat trucks. Right? You've got to put it up. You've got to have it. It's a real market. It's a real exchange. You have to, when you're selling metal, you can't sell stuff you counterfeit in the paper market and push the price around. Period. The end. And the Chinese, it was widely reported, the Chinese said, well, we have the Shanghai Gold Exchange to control the price. Now, how long do you think the Chinese are going to let the price go up overnight overseas and be crushed at COMEX over here? How long do you think that's going to go on for? I talked to Bill Holter, at JS Mindset, and he's going to be a guest coming up on the early Sunday release. Bill Holter, I'm going to interview him over the weekend, and he says, listen, that's not going to keep continuing to go on. At some point, I mean, they don't have very much money in the COMEX at this point. I mean, he's been saying for the longest time, Bill Holter, that, $1 billion and they can clean it out. I mean, to China. What's $1 billion when they hold a trillion, 2 or 3 in treasuries? I mean, a few trades and poof, they cannot and will not deliver gold. And then what happens? Then all you have is the Shanghai Gold Exchange. That's it. Same thing with silver. Silver was up 70 cents and then crushed when it opened up in the first 10 minutes of the market. And another thing I wanted to bring up is this Deutsche Bank thing. This broke last week when I had Holter on. And Deutsche Bank, one of the biggest banks in the world, primary dealer of treasuries, Deutsche Bank, overseas, huge bank, right? They admit to rigging the gold market and the silver market. Now, a lot of people say the gold and silver market like it's one market. It is not. 2 separate markets. Deutsche Bank admits to doing it, admits to colluding with other banks, names HSBC, primary dealer of treasuries, names Bank of Nova Scotia, also a primary dealer of treasuries, and Deutsche Bank, a primary dealer of treasuries. Are you getting my drift here? These are all interconnected primary dealers of treasuries, and we haven't named any American banks yet, but they're involved. The primary dealers of treasuries are probably involved in. Why? Why are they involved? Because they want to make real money look bad. Now, I've also had people on the site say, I've got bad advice since 2011. Well, they've been rigging this market since before then. But, it went steroidal in 2011. Silver pops up to $49. Gold's at $1,900. And why was that happening? That was happening because they were flooding the world with paper, currency, and bond issuance. The advice was sound. I mean, that's what you do when the people are hyperinflating their currencies and printing bonds like crazy and printing money to buy bonds to bail out people. And what they eventually did after 2008-9, this collapse, they basically created enough currency, enough debt. They created enough debt to equal the global GDP, about 70 trillion, almost nearly 70 trillion. They exploded the debt. So, of course, the advice back in 09 and 10 and 11 when it was going up was to buy gold and silver, buy hard assets, buy things that would hold their value. And, of course, that makes real money look bad. So what did the Deutsche Bank do? What did Deutsche Bank and their criminal crony banking buddies do? Right? They rig the markets. They admitted to rigging the markets. They admitted they rigged the markets with other banks. This is now a fact, not a speculation. So the advice is good, but the criminal bankers made it look bad. And what happened was they broke the thermometer and they wrote in 72 and they painted a picture that, oh, look, everything's cool. It's 72. It's perfect. It's great. Meanwhile, the real thermometer in the background is going up, 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 up until it's almost blowing the top out at about 170. So the canary that would have said, whoa, warning, danger, warning, hey, whoa, they're creating too much debt. Woo, turn that off by suppressing the price of gold and silver. And now we have, fast forward to the Shanghai Gold Exchange, where the Chinese want to, quote, control the price. And you can't control the price unless you have the metal. And last I checked, China has a whole lot of gold and a whole lot of silver. And the COMEX has diddly squat, and so does the LBMA, and you can't control the price if you don't have the product. You can't control the price of corn if you don't have any. You can't control the price of oil if you don't have any. And you can't control the price of gold and silver if you don't have any. I don't think this is going to go on for that long. And I wonder if that was one of the things they were talking about in these emergency Fed meetings, where Reuters actually reported they were talking about instituting martial law. Whoa. Jim Rickards said that, if people do start selling treasuries, China or Saudi Arabia or anybody starts selling, the president has emergency powers. He can just call over the treasury and stop it. Really? I wonder what wouldn't be any much of a downside if you took the most liquid market in the world, the U.S. Treasury market, and made it instantly illiquid. A lot of bad things coming down the pipe. And they're not looking good. Also about this gold and silver manipulations, particularly on the gold side, Jim Sinclair, renowned gold expert, Jim Sinclair, who has a mine in Tanzania, a gold mine, and anybody who has been doing mining has been injured. Well, guess what Jim Sinclair is doing for he and his shareholders? Preparing a lawsuit against these banks. And the other lawsuits have already been filed, and I'm sure many, many more lawsuits are going to be filed. But somehow, this is not a story for the mainstream media. I watched all of the financial channels. I read as many newspapers as I get my hands on. Nothing. Zero. Boom. Radio silence. Nothing. This is a huge story, folks. This is a story involving primary dealers, not little bitty dinky banks. If you're a primary dealer of treasuries, you are a big global bank. And now this is a story that involves racketeering, basically, people conspiring to commit crimes, and fraud, and Deutsche Bank admitting and naming names. This is a fact, and now this is going to hatch baby stories in the terms of multi-billion-dollar lawsuits, and this isn't a story to cover. Not going to cover this. This is fraud in the news business, complete and total fraud. Complete and total massive fraud in the news business, and yet I'm moving things around, change my thing. Yet here we have the USA Today talking about the Pulitzer's honor journalism. Oh, and it makes a difference, and they ignore the fraud. They don't talk about the massive crimes taking place. You could quote William Black, who's a professor of economics and law, an expert, a professor, an expert on white-collar crime, saying there's nothing but fraud and crime, and fraud is the number one way that banks make money. And yet, look, Pulitzer Prize for the refugees, and that may be a big story, but none of the other stories are big. None of the other stories about fraud and crime. You could document all the fraud and nobody goes to jail. Like, a couple of weeks ago, Goldman Sachs to pay $5 billion in mortgage settlement for mishandling mortgages. Misleading, mishandling, misstating, misspeaking, all buzzwords for what I think fraud. And then you have Wells Fargo Bank that just became a primary dealer of treasuries, which is a license to print money. They paid $1.2 billion fine to the government for misleading, misleading information about mortgages. Isn't that fraud? But that's not a story for the journalists, patting themselves in the back about how wonderful the job they're doing. That's all ignored, all the massive crime and fraud. That would make Bernie Madoff cringe, actually. Unbelievable. Really, quite unbelievable. I just want to finish up with Trump. He won, and I cover politics, but if you want the play-by-play, hit-by-hit, you can watch, Fox or MSNBC or CNBC or whatever, or CNN. Here's my local paper, and I'm always shocked. And I rarely front runners sweep, and it's a nice picture of Trump, and actually a pretty nice story. Hillary Clinton's not pictured here. It's actually Trump. This is my local paper, News and Record. Actually, I'm shocked that it's basically a clean, unbiased story about Donald Trump. Actually shocked. But then again, you have, like the USA Today. And I have two stories here, folks. Two stories in the USA Today. They both came out in the same day, in the same paper. And let's start with Donald Trump here. Donald Trump, this is when he wins. This is the next day he wins. And, lower key Trump looking to clinch GOP nomination. Oh, okay. All right. Here's the byline. Yet on Wednesday, the new Trump sounded just like the old Trump. And here's the quote they used. Now, listen, folks, as a journalist, you can't just, they said it. We didn't say it. Listen, when you pick a quote, when you pick a quote, that is like you saying it. And it says, no shift in tone, message, or policy is going to erase anyone's memory of how Trump has been conducting himself. Well, he's conducting himself like an American and a front runner. And, when I did investigative reporting, you couldn't let somebody say, well, so-and-so is a criminal. You better have a record. You better have a way to justify because if you let somebody say something on a story, you're saying it. So basically, USA Today is saying that, they're making basically a value judgment about how Trump is conducting himself, and they're passing this off as a legitimate news story on the day after. So, yeah, they have some news that he won in New York, but then they make all these editorial comments. But, USA Today, they're not screwing him over. They're not trying to be unfair. This is fair, right? So here in the same paper, you have numbers are up for Clinton. Positive story about Clinton. I kid you not. This is fair, right? A positive story for Clinton the day after, and a negative story for Trump. That's fair, right? That's fair reporting. No, that's not fair reporting. Absolutely, positively not fair reporting. And one of the last things that they don't cover in the news is this all these paper shorts and all this other stuff. They ought to be covering all this fraud. Remember what a great story this is. What a great story that the CFTC had a 5-year investigation on silver manipulation. They ended it in 2013 and said, "Whoop, we didn't find anything." Deutsche Bank comes out, 3 years later and says, "Yeah, we manipulated the whole thing, the silver market and the gold market, and we did it with other primary bank dealers of treasuries." Yep. Why aren't they doing a story? They're breaking their backs, their necks about how, oh, hey, we're Pulitzer Prize winners. And they ignore the fraud, the crime, the malfeasance. That's a huge story, isn't it? Why isn't somebody holding the CFTC's feet to the fire? Gary Gensler was the head of that little organization, former Goldman guy. And, of course, they found nothing. Dumbfounded. Outrageous. It's too stupid to be stupid, as Jim Sinclair would say. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog. Thank you for your kind words and comments that you missed me and that you were worried about me. Nothing happened to me. I just ran with the best story and best information I could put out there. That was Rob Kirby. I hope he comes back. Thank you for all your comments in supporting the site. I appreciate it. You guys add links and information to make the site rich and good. Thank you for your donations. That helps us out. And remember, this is my favorite part. Fear not. Prepare yourself physically, mentally, and above all, spiritually. Fear not. God the Father is in charge.